Welcome. We begin with Sudan. The civil war in the northeast African nation, which is nearing its 2-year mark, has left thousands dead and millions displaced. It has set off one of the world's worst famines in decades, with 26 million people facing acute hunger or starvation. The war has collapsed the country's economy, shattered its health infrastructure, and has turned many of its cities into piles of rubble. Yet, as the country continues to burn, it is witnessing a massive gold rush. Billions of dollars worth of gold is flowing out of Sudan. The production and trade of gold has surpassed pre-war levels. In the first year of war alone, Sudanese officials say the country produced over 50 tons of gold, which is more than during the previous 12 months. The country is rife with gold smuggling. But instead of using the gains to bring Sudan back on its feet, the gold trade boom has been enriching the generals of the warring sides and further propelling the fight by helping to pay for the drones, guns and missiles that have killed thousands across the country. The current civil war that began in April of 2023 pits Sudan's army, led by General Abdel Fattah Al-Burhan, against the paramilitary RSF commander, General Mohamed Hamadan Dagalo, popularly known as Hemedti. In fact, gold is at the heart of how and why the war began. Camel trader turned warlord and RSF chief Hemedti grew powerful after his forces seized one of Sudan's most lucrative gold mines in 2017. He effectively became Sudan's biggest gold trader overnight. This mine is located in the Spain-sized Darfur region, where a genocide triggered global outrage 20 years ago, and the horrors have now returned to the area. It helped Hemedti to build a billion-dollar empire that transformed the RSF into a massive force. Hemedti later sold this mine to the government for $200 million and used this money to buy even more weapons. This wealth, ambition and influence led to a standoff between the RSF and the Sudan army and paved the way for the civil war. With that, the fight for gold also intensified. In 2023, Hemedti seized back the mine that he sold to the government. Sudan's de facto government also claims the RSF fighters broke into the national gold refinery in Khartoum and took away $150 million in gold bars. Sudan's military is not far behind. It has been ramping up gold production in areas under government control. It has also been inviting foreign powers for mining, including China. The army has been negotiating gold and gun deals with Russia. They even share a gold mine with Gulf leaders. But where does all of this illicit gold go? Who are the top buyers accelerating Sudan's illegal gold rush? Reports say there are multiple foreign players involved who play both sides with the RSF and with the Sudanese army. Russian President Vladimir Putin has long heralded gold mining in Sudan. After the Wagner chief Prigozhin's death, the Kremlin took over the gold business with Sudan. Russia is reportedly partnering with the RSF in the west and the army in the east. Second, and the most influential player, is the United Arab Emirates. The UAE has been accused of arming the RSF with weapons, including drones and missiles. UN experts have accused the UAE of smuggling arms into Sudan via Chad under the guise of a humanitarian mission. Abu Dhabi, however, has repeatedly dismissed these allegations. And when it comes to gold, the UAE is helping to fund the Sudanese army. An Emirati company linked by officials to the royal family owns the largest industrial mine in Sudan, which sits in the government-controlled region. It's called the Kush Mine and sits in Darfur. It reportedly generates tens of millions of dollars for the Sudan government that uses the money to buy Iranian drones, Chinese aircraft, and other weapons. According to the U.S. State Department, nearly all of the smuggled gold from Sudan ends up in the United Arab Emirates. Since the beginning of the civil war, the U.S. has imposed sanctions on 11 RSF companies, mostly in the Emirates, and often linked to the gold trade. A study by Swiss Aid claims the RSF has ready market for its gold in the UAE. It states that 2,500 tons of underclayed gold from Africa, worth $115 billion, was smuggled to the UAE between 2012 and 2022. The next big question is, how is the gold getting out? Now, before the war, the RSF chief reportedly flew his gold directly to the UAE. But Sudan's main airport has been destroyed in the current war. The other way, through sea, is also impossible since Port Sudan is under the control of the military. So Hemedti has found new routes. Now, these new smuggling routes were through Sudan's neighboring countries, including South Sudan. Uganda is also seen as a major hub for smuggled African gold. Sudan's gold boom actually kicked off over a decade ago. In 2011, after the succession of South Sudan, gold made up for oil revenues that Sudan lost. It made up for 70% of the country's exports. The Sudanese people built their future around it, storing jewelry at home and in banks. But the civil war took it all away. Gold was looted from homes and stolen from banks. Whatever is left, the people rely on it to survive in these dire conditions. And gold that was once seen as key to lift Sudan's economy today has become one of the reasons for its downfall. And joining us live for more on this is Musa Mdunge, an international affairs expert who is joining us live from from Dundee in the UK. Thank you for being with us, Musa.
Thank you so much, Alison, for having me. Good afternoon to you and to the viewers.
Musa, how has the ongoing civil war in Sudan contributed to the surge in illicit gold trade? And what are the mechanisms enabling smuggling and corruption within the mining sector?
Well, thank you so much, Alison, for having me again. One of the contributing factors towards the smuggling of gold, which has been a very, very key resource, as your segment put it, in terms of the machinery of both sides, the Sudanese armed forces as well as the RSF, both sides have benefited from the illicit flow of gold and have done that through the various relations that they have had. So, for example, you think of the fact that the Sudanese armed forces control most of the gold mining in northern Sudan, as well as along the Eritrea-Ethiopia border, which they have used as a very key diplomatic tool, if I might add, in getting both Egypt and Russia towards the side and the ambit of the Sudanese armed forces. As you know, formerly Russia supported the rebel side and has since changed sides. And moreover, beyond that, you then have the role of China as well, which is included within that. So a lot of the smuggling is happening through airstrips that are controlled by either sides. There's a lot of human trafficking that has been associated with the gold smuggling that is flowing particularly between Sudan as well as Egypt as well as Chad. And in many ways, the modus operandi in terms of that has been to ask each of those human beings are being smuggled to carry a certain size of gold with them, allowing for that gold to go undetected. And in many ways, this has been the modus operandi that has really helped fuel the situation.
You've mentioned the role that these foreign players, particularly Russia and the UAE, play in the illicit gold trade in Sudan. How does this influence the dynamics of the civil war and the regional geopolitics?
Well, it has huge geopolitical implications here. Let us not forget that Sudan, for the longest time, before the war, was among the top 10 largest gold producers in Africa. And so for a country like Russia that is going through its own war and conflict, it needs relations that are strong economically. It needs access to illicit funds that will allow it to be able to fund its own war effort in Ukraine. And so that's where, for example, the Russian pivot towards the Sudanese armed forces in terms of its support. Included in that support, of course, is China, the other huge BRICS member as well, where, last September, for example, the general who is the head of the Sudanese armed forces attended the FOCAC meeting, and there the Chinese president was very clear in giving his support for them, but also the Sudanese delegation, made it plain that they would like to see greater Chinese investment because both sides here, Alison, require and need the funds from the gold from the selling of gold in order to fund their war effort. In many ways, the diplomacy that we are seeing both sides play, it plays into that factor.
Right. And on that, what are the potential consequences of this illegal gold trade funding the war? Now, this on Sudan's economy and also its ability to recover from the civil war. And what measures can be taken by international bodies to mitigate these impacts?
Thank you for that. Well, one of the things that have been interesting here, Alison, is given the illicit flow, the price for gold, the selling price for gold in Sudan is quite low. And given that, it means that the Sudanese people are, for all intents and purposes, not benefiting from the illicit trade. Rather, it is benefiting both the armed forces, where both sides have made allowance, for example, for soldiers to themselves also loot, given the dire economic situation in Sudan. And secondly, given that countries like Egypt, UAE, Russia can then sell that gold at a higher price, means that they are enjoying the dividends of Sudanese gold. And in many ways, Alison, I think that for the next, say, 10 to 20 years, the economic wastage, the economic damage that this conflict has caused is still going to be borne out, and we have not seen the fullness of it, because then you've got to think about that greater regional risk to countries like Ethiopia, Eritrea, Chad. It's such a volatile region, and often when investors think of Africa, they think of Africa as a whole and don't think of the individual contexts of different countries. So in many ways, the Sudanese economic crisis will grow